Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Oner podcast, the podcast where we break down and review films all in one big, long, unbroken take. I'm Austin Archer, and with me, as always, is my childhood next-door neighbor and lifelong best friend,
Cramer England. Hey, man. Hey, man. How you doing? Hey.
Jeffrey Wright.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, man. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing? Hey.
Yeah, we are. We're back in Wes Anderson world again. Recently we did an episode on the Royal Tenenbaums after Gene Hackman passed, and we're back. We're doing Wes Anderson again. Wes Anderson is back with The Phoenician Scheme.
Yes.
Written by Wes Anderson and Roman Coppola. I think this is their second writing partnership, or maybe their third time writing together.
Question. I don't know.
I believe they wrote Isle of Dogs together. I might be wrong about that, and they might have done a one other one together.
Sounds. I guess he just did the story. So Wes Anderson and Roman Coppola, it's the story by, but then Wes Anderson wrote the screenplay.
Okay. Okay.
But I imagine that there was a pretty thought out story. So.
Yeah. Okay. So, initial thoughts before we get into the plot. I will say, first off, I saw this like 2 weeks ago, and I'm having a hard time keeping the timeline fresh in my mind of everything that happened in this movie.
I saw it 2 days ago, so
yeah,
it's a little more fresh in my mind, but I'm going to be honest, man. I did not like this movie. This movie was not good for me. And I mean, I can remember it, but also I just did not. It just did not hit for me. I usually like Wes Anderson, even like his like Life Aquatic is probably one of the lesser liked Wes Anderson movies. I like that. I can appreciate it. This was so devoid of emotion for me that I just could not connect, and I just did not care about. Like, usually Wes Anderson is so good at having everything so mundane and like so just like stagnant and just delivering the lines without any emotion, and then he'll have these scenes that really bring everything home and really bring the emotion, and like, wow, that was like really poignant and really like it just somehow it works. This had none of that for me.
Yeah. For a lot of people, a lot of critics, reviews I'm seeing are saying like Wes is back. Like he went through this weird slump with like The French Dispatch and Asteroid City, where it was just kind of like, what are we doing here? What are these movies about? And like, and then people are like, we're back to vintage Wes. We're back. I even had a lot of friends of mine who are like big Wes heads tell me before I saw it, like, oh, you're going to like this one. It's back on, baby. So I went in with really high hopes. I always go to a Wes Anderson movie with high hopes because he occupies a very special place in my heart.
Right.
I believe, and I think I said this on the Royal Tenenbaums episode, but in my personal opinion, Rushmore, the Royal Tenenbaums, Life Aquatic, and the Darjeeling Limited, his, Bottle Rocket was the first film, but I think that he becomes the Wes Anderson we know in Rushmore. I think that's like the first like mainstream Wes Anderson film. And those four films to me are just about as perfect as cinema gets in my mind. Like they are just so perfectly executed, from the vision of the director to the collaboration with the actors to the writing to the unique comedic voice, the cinematography, the production design, the costume design, everything, the music, everything in those movies just works so well for me. And every time I go back to them, they don't lose any of their shine. They just continue to grow on me and continue. Like the Life Aquatic was one that you mentioned that like the first time I saw that, it was like, oh, I thought that movie was going to be funnier, or, I don't know. And every time I go back to it, it's one of my all-time favorites now. Like I have the submarine tattooed on my arm from that
that's
movie.
From that. Oh, I thought that was like Beatles.
A lot of people think it's the Beatles. It's the Deep Search submarine from the Life Aquatic.
Wait, can you show it again? Because
I can't know if we can.
Oh yeah, you can. Oh yeah, I should have known that. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, there. Yeah.
I always thought that was Yellow Submarine. I'm so sorry. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Life Aquatic is better than most people think.
And I think those four films are like Darjeeling Limited. A lot of people are like, I don't really know how I feel about that. I'm like, go back and watch it. It's so good. The relationship between those three actors, Schwartzman, Brody, and Owen Wilson, is so strong. And what what those early films have is what you're talking about, where it's like they all have the idiosyncrasies of a Wes Anderson film, the color palette, the cinematography, the framing, the dollhouse aesthetic, but the characters inside of those films feel like real people.
Yeah,
And when they
totally.
talk to each other, they're having conversations that feel real, and they have relationships that feel real. And everything in these last, especially these last three films,
Yeah.
Dispatch, Asteroid City, and now Phoenician Scheme, to me is so exactly what you said, just like ice cold, like robotic.
Yeah.
It's like I just don't feel like I'm watching human beings talk to it. They look like puppets. Like the actors behave like, it just feels to me like every actor is doing an impression of an impression of a Wes Anderson movie. And even like, I mean, you got like world-class actors in this cast. And it feels like they're acting with a straitjacket on, because they're being directed so specifically to be like, you need to be standing at exactly this angle with your hand here, and you're not allowed to move. So every single scene is like, well, I saw you go into the room over there. And it's like, well, I heard you, and it's just, it's like monotone, lifeless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really, like, you're spot on. Like, this was so, like, Benicio del Toro is an amazing actor. Like, I love him. And he's just very monotone. I mean, he's probably he had the most character of anybody for this movie, but like his early films, like I have only seen half of Darjeeling Limited. But what I saw, it's like they're acting with emotion. There's like real characters, like again, like Gene Hackman is like, he's trying to make a character who has his own personal traits, his own idiosyncrasies, even though they kind of reflect Wes Anderson's. But this movie, no one had any character. Like Mia Throppleton, who I think seems like a very talented actress, she was just the most deadpan of all. And I'm like, man, I mean, Michael Cera was pretty funny.
I liked Michael Cera here. I want to give flowers to Michael Cera. It feels like one of those things where it's like, how has Michael Cera never been in a Wes Anderson movie until now?
Yes.
And it feels like such an obvious fit. And I do think he was one of the actors that managed to do something with the character that he was given. But Mia Throppleton, to me, was the person that I was like, she's in this movie because she's doing an impression of Gwyneth Paltrow in the Royal Tenenbaums, or what she thinks. And same with Scarlett Johansson. She does it too. She does this like impression of what she thinks a Wes Anderson movie is, where it's just like no emotion, deadpan. And I'm like, I know that there are a lot of female ingenues in Wes Anderson movies who do that. If we look at the way that that Susie is in Moonrise Kingdom, like she's kind of got this deadpan delivery, and the way that Margot is in Royal Tenenbaums. And we've seen this several different times, but like you look at the teacher from Rushmore, the woman that like Bill Murray, like she's got emotion to her character. That's a fully fledged,
she seems like a real person.
Yeah, a three-dimensional real person inside of the Wes Anderson aesthetic. And Margot's deadpan thing wasn't just Gwyneth Paltrow doing deadpan to be deadpan. It was motivated by the character of Margot Tenenbaum. It's like she is an emotionally closed off person. She doesn't let her emotions come to but when Richie tries to kill himself in that movie and she confronts him in his tent, the dam breaks and she breaks down and cries. And she like, and she like begs Richie, like, please don't do that again. Like, and, she kisses him and then she says, like, I think we're just going to have to be secretly in love with each other and leave it at that, Richie. But it's like, you see that like Margot's deadpanness is almost a self-defense mechanism. It's her way of not letting the world hurt her, not letting the fact that her father always addresses her as his adopted daughter and things like, and I can see how Throppleton's character in this movie is similar to that. You can make a lot of parallels between Zsa Zsa Corda, who is Benicio's character, Benicio del Toro's character, and Royal Tenenbaum. And his relationship with his daughter, that he sort of has this estranged relationship, and late in life he's trying in his weird emotionally detached way to make it right. But compare those two movies. Compare the character of Royal Tenenbaum to Zsa Zsa Corda, and how much life and energy and levels and colors there are to Royal versus the one note we get from Zsa Zsa from the beginning of the movie to the end of the movie. And the same with Mia Throppleton's character. And there are two main characters, and every conversation they have is just like ba 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 ba. And it just gets, it's hard to listen to a full-length film where every scene is delivered with the same cadence. And where it like another thing I thought about was exposition. The way that Wes Anderson delivers exposition in his films. I was thinking because I watched The Life Aquatic like 2 nights before I saw this movie.
Okay.
My niece had never seen it, and she wanted to come over to my parents' house and watch a movie. And she was like, "What should we watch?" And I said, "How familiar are you with like Wes Anderson movies?" And she was like, "I haven't seen any of them." So I was like, "Well, which one?" So I like told her about the first few, and I was like, "Which one of those sounds fun to you?" And she was like, "Let's watch the submarine one." And I was like, "Okay, cool." So we watched that one, and she loved it. And then like 2 days later, I watched this movie, and I was like, all I could think the entire movie was, there's so many scenes in The Life Aquatic where Bill Murray and Owen Wilson are having conversations and they sound like real people talking to each other. And none of that is here. And it's not, and it hasn't been for a while. It's been lacking from the last several films. And I just was like, I don't know why this switch has been made. But yeah, going back to exposition, I think about Alec Baldwin's iconic narration from the beginning, the prologue of Royal Tenenbaums. The way that movie just says, here are the characters, here's the setting, here's the Tenenbaum family, and it's delivered slowly and with feeling, and you get to see things, visuals of all of the kids and who they are, and it sets the stage for like, here's where we're at. This movie does something similar, and it's been done in the last couple movies where it's like, we need to tell you who Zsa Zsa Korda is, what the Phoenician Scheme is, what all the, but the way that the characters deliver the exposition is so hard to follow. It feels like the movie is like intentionally making this really necessary. It almost feels like Wes Anderson's like, let's just get it done quickly. So there's a scene early on in this film where there's like a room full of, what I assume are like government dignitaries or something who are conspiring to take down Zsa Zsa Korda and his empire. And one of them gives a slideshow presentation about Zsa Zsa Korda, and he delivers the information just like, Zsa Zsa Korda, blah, 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 and we do like a bunch of slides. And by the time that, while that was going on, I was thinking in my head, like, oh my, no, I need to know this information. Oh no. Like, and I was going like, he's talking so fast. And I'm,
I was so lost. I was like, whatever, like, I'll figure it out eventually.
Right. And that's what I thought too, is like, I guess I'll figure it out. And I sort of did, but I was also, but then at the end of the movie, I was like, no, I could have actually used a more creative way to deliver that information to me. And
absolutely. And it's Rupert Friend who's giving that. I think the biggest thing, there's a lot here. This definitely is very similar to Royal Tenenbaums. Like, and I felt like the story itself of a father trying to connect with his daughter and the ending actually works. Like it works when you just look at it on the surface or on paper. Like, yes, that worked really, really well. But the delivery of everything is what the problem is. And I think that Wes Anderson he's a victim of his own success, right? Like he's kind of like George Lucas in a way that no one wants to tell him no, and no one wants to tell him anything different because he is Wes Anderson. He's doing everything. So everybody is coming in like, okay, I'm going to do what Wes Anderson wants. And I'm going to do it exactly how he wants it. And so they give these deliveries of lines like this, and they don't give any sort of character. It's like, maybe push back against Wes Anderson. Like, give your character some character.
Early on in his filmmaking career, people didn't know what a Wes Anderson movie was.
Yeah.
So but also like, I feel like the collaboration between him and his casts early on was stronger because people were coming in with ideas about how they wanted to do it. And you're right. I said this to my friend that I talked to about it. He said that, he goes, I don't know if it's Wes's fault as a director and a writer, or if it's that actors are just showing up with what they think he wants and he's not correcting them. And I'm like, either way, he still should, as a director, go like, oh, look, listen, you don't need to do an impression of what you feel like my movies look like. Like, feel free to, but I do think it's on him, because you can just see with the blocking and the staging of scenes how constrained the performers are.
Yeah.
That they're like, I mean, there's again, going back to exposition, early on in this film, there's a scene where Zsa Zsa is explaining the Phoenician scheme to his daughter, and played by Mia Throppleton. And he has all these shoe boxes that have the details of the different deals that he's doing in this scheme. And he's going through each shoebox and pointing out which one. And again, this is another moment where I was like, I could really use, like, somehow you got to get this information to me in a clearer way, because we just talked about the Mission Impossible movies. These movies always have to tell us, like, here's who the bad guy is, here's what they're planning on doing, here's what we need to do to stop them. Now let's go do the movie. That's what this scene is in the Phoenician scheme. But Wes delivers it with the most, like, the language is so thick and it's delivered so quickly and in such a monotone way. But in this scene, Mia Throppleton is sitting on this little chair. She's like, she's sat, and her knees are like angled like this, just off to the side, and she's sitting very properly. And Zsa Zsa is standing behind a chair with a cane with his hand on the seat, and they both are like, they're like not moving while they're talking, and they're like frozen. And so much of the movie is staged that way, where a character will be like standing like this, almost like a portrait, like a painting.
Yeah, a painting,
and they're just talking like, well, so I obviously had to, but and you can tell, like, they've been blocked to do this. And it feels like the director has put clamps on them physically and said, you need to stay in this position. I want your knees tilted to a slightly 45-degree angle, and I don't want in a straight back posture, and I don't want you to move. And so it feels like the actors themselves are like, I don't have freedom to
do anything. Yeah, and I totally saw that as well. I think it is intentional. I feel like it is intentional, because there's a huge there's a huge, I wouldn't say a theme, but I mean, you see a lot of portraits in this film. You see a lot of artwork, and I think Wes Anderson is trying to make the connection. He is staging everything as if it is a portrait, and if it is kind of a still life. But like, listen, you get one frame of it, that's great. Let your characters move around. Let your actors, emote with their bodies. Like, you don't have to have them as statues.
Well, so that's the next thing. That's the next big thing that separates this latest era of Wes Anderson filmmaking from the earlier era to me, is the variety in shot selection. So he's always been good about creating a shot that looks like a portrait, that looks like a painting. That's kind of existed in all of his films. There's been these shots that's like, that right there is portraiture. That is, it's a painting. Everything is perfectly composed. Everything is situated in the frame exactly where it should be. It's beautiful. But he doesn't only do that in the earlier films. He has those moments. We talked about in the Royal Tenenbaums, one of my favorite scenes of all time in any movie is when Margot comes to pick up Richie at the and Richie's waiting for her, and she gets off the bus, and there's these beautiful portraits of like her stepping off this bus in slow motion and him sitting and waiting for her with these sailors walking behind him. And it's like beautiful portraiture, but the entire movie is not in that setup. The movie itself then has lots of different ways that it approaches different scenes in its shot selection. And in these latest 3 films, Wes Anderson has moved his kind of full-time aspect ratio to this perfect square aspect ratio. That's what he operates in. And every single shot selection is a perfect square, perfectly symmetrical frame. And every single shot selection is one of these portraits. And all the only movement will be a dolly push in or a dolly pull out or a whip pan. And that's it. And there is like no variety.
No. This actually stood out to me though. There is a handheld scene, a handheld shot in this movie
when they're fighting at the end.
When they're fighting at the end. And I read a review that was like, that came out of nowhere and was so jarring and it made no sense, which I agree. Like, it was such a weird thing to have him do handheld, but it's also like, hey, something different. Like, wow.
The fact that I knew exactly what you were talking about immediately. You said there's one moment in this movie where he's not doing the square, and I was like, it's the fight at the end. And that's crazy because his earlier films have lots of moments where he goes handheld. It happens a lot. There's lots of different moments where he'll decide like this scene should. There's like a scene on the beach, in The Life Aquatic where Ned is. They go out at night because there's glowing jellyfish on the beach and they're filming them. And it's all handheld, and it's the scene where Steve Zissou like says to Ned, he's like, "I want you to be on Team Zissou," and then Ned's like, "Well, I guess I'll say yes. I guess my answer is yes." He's like, "Well, it's gotta be," and that whole scene is handheld, and then Steve's wife leaves, played by Angelica Houston, and that's handheld as she's flying away, and like there's in Darjeeling Limited, they're constantly like going through India with these like handheld setups that feel like dirtier and messier. And there's just a wider variety of looks and setups. It becomes incredibly visually stagnant to look at a film that has like 2 to 3. It's kind of like the movie Here that we talked about. Where it's like, it's really hard to do a film with a stagnant visual setup. And that's sort of how these latest films feel for a guy who's so visually interesting and visually talented. It's weird to see him limiting himself to like, I'm just going to live in the square and that's it.
And it really, it is hard to connect with the movie. It's hard to get into. It was really hard for me to get into the movie for all of these reasons. The other thing that I noticed, I don't know if you noticed this, but there were a lot of big continuity errors. And there were a lot of like, it's just going from one shot to another. Like somebody's hand is up here, right? And then in the next shot, they're over, it's on the table or whatever. But a lot of those things. And I was like, that's so strange for me in a Wes Anderson film because he is so meticulous about everything. And I'm like, I don't know. That was a weird, distracting thing for me because it was like, he's so meticulous. And then there are these shots. And I mean, that's more of a, not the biggest deal. It doesn't make the movie bad. Like, I really don't care that much about those type of errors, right? Like that doesn't take me out. But it happens so much in this type of film that is just a square and so focused on getting the exact camera movement and the exact movement of the actors that I was like, it felt very strange to me. I don't know if anybody else noticed it, but that was like, that stood out kind of like a sore thumb for me.
So I did not notice those, but
Okay.
I think the reason why you probably did notice it is because of how meticulous and specific his shot selection is.
Yeah.
That when something like that happens, you just notice it more because it's like, is that intentional? Is he doing that on purpose to draw my attention to? Because he did some visual things in this film that I've never seen him do before that he's always doing. And he's been playing around in these last 3 films. And he talks about this a lot, that him and his cinematographer have just felt the freedom to go like, we don't need to justify any visual choices that we want to make. If we just feel like we want to change the aspect ratio for one scene, we can do it. If we feel like we want to change to black and white for a sequence, we can, and we don't need, if we feel like, and they did a thing. I don't know if you noticed all like the cigarette burns that would happen sometimes that were like really, really obvious, like almost like a digital, like flash that would happen on the screen from time to time in scenes. And maybe it was just my screening, but I thought, oh, this must be an intentional choice that every once in a while, these like white, almost like splotches of squares would go like pop, pop and like flash on the screen. For, and I thought maybe because he is so specific that maybe those continuity errors are just an intentional thing that he's layering into the.
I wondered if that was the case. But yeah, it is.
So, okay. I think we both feel similarly about this film, that it was sort of frustrating to watch. For me, it's really frustrating because he's such a clearly talented filmmaker.
Absolutely.
And it's so frustrating to watch someone with such a like strong skill set. Kind of like you said, he's his own worst enemy. And I think what went on earlier in his career is he just had more people collaborating with him who didn't know who he was and who were willing to like insist upon their ideas or push back against some of his instincts. And I think that's good for
It
filmmakers. There's this kind of phrase that happens in the industry a lot where people will say, like, if you're going to go make a film, people will be like, I hope you make the film where the shark doesn't work. And what they're referring to is Jaws, that a young Steven Spielberg was going to go make this shark movie, and they had this big expensive animatronic shark, and it just wasn't working. It was, you know, it looked phony, it was sinking, it was all kinds of problems. And he ran into a friend, I think it was like George Lucas, he ran into coming home from shooting it, and he was like, how'd the movie go? And he goes, we didn't get it. He's like, I don't have my movies. Like, the shark didn't work. And then they went into the editing room and they found the movie in the editing room, and they just wound up making a movie where the shark was in the film a lot less. And I even think like we just talked about Minority Report, and we talked about how like maybe that's the last like really great Steven Spielberg film. And it's not that he hasn't had great films since then. It's just that what you see with a guy like Steven Spielberg is every person that works with him now in every department knows that their work is expected to be immaculate, that everything is expected to be perfect, and that like Steven is going to get what he wants. And so what you see in Steven Spielberg films at this age is just really, really slick filmmaking. Just like everything looks exactly the way he wants it to be. Everything is situated, is staged exactly right. And they're really competently made films. But I think what we're missing that we have in earlier works like Close Encounters and E.T. and, you know, even even Jurassic Park is we're missing that like conflict of the filmmaking team having to problem solve and having to get creative and having to overcome obstacles. And I think that, I don't know, I just don't know how you inject that into a career like Wes Anderson's. Or
it really, like, at a certain point you have to do things a certain way, and sometimes you can't come back from that. And I mean, that doesn't mean Wes Anderson's not going to make any good films anymore. Like he will, but I also don't know if he's ever going to make a film that's not a Wes Anderson film. Like, and he more than anyone, honestly, you know, you're watching a Wes Anderson movie immediately. Like, even Quentin Tarantino, there are other people who can mimic him. You know, Christopher Nolan, Steven Spielberg, Martin Scorsese, all these auteurs, no one comes close to having the style that he has. And I don't mean that completely as a positive.
Right.
In this case of what we're talking about, like like, I'd love to see him just do something completely different, just to try and make a movie where he doesn't do anything that looks Wes Anderson-y. But, you know, that's his choice. If he doesn't like doing that, then no reason to do that.
I don't think we're ever going to see it.
No, I don't either.
I think for better or worse, like, this is what it is. And I keep having to kind of think that like I have an attachment to those early films, and what works about them to me is that confluence of the perfect framing and the portraiture of the shots and the perfect production design and the perfect costume design mixed with these like really interesting layered characters and performances. And that's what really works for me. And like, that's what makes the humor sing. That's what makes the emotion sing. And now all the movies have is like the perfect clean, crisp thing. And I'm losing the characters. And I mean, we're not in the majority here. A lot of people really like this movie, and a lot of people really like the last three. There are aspects of Asteroid City that I enjoy. There are aspects of French Dispatch that I enjoy. I really like Benicio del Toro's section of French Dispatch. I think it's the best part of the movie. And there are a lot of aspects of Phoenician Scheme that I found enjoyable. So we've talked a lot about what is frustrating about this film and what doesn't work. But it's kind of like when we did like Joker 2, where it's like everyone in the world was like, this is the worst movie ever. And you go watch it and it's like, this is a very competently made film. Movies get way worse than this. Like, it has gorgeous cinematography, really strong lead performances. It's just not delivering what the audience felt like they were owed from a Joker sequel. It was so in a frustrating way. And that's how I feel watching Wes Anderson movies lately, is like, I can't say it's poorly made or poorly constructed, because he's executing what he wants to execute at an incredibly high level. It's just that like I'm constantly disappointed that it doesn't feel more like the older films. And you know,
I mean it's I completely agree. Like this movie is exactly the movie that Wes Anderson wanted to make. But it's not going to hit with everybody. I mean, a lot of, the funny thing is a lot of the critic responses that I've read, their reviews, some of them are totally praising it and they love it. Others are kind of like, it's not really great, but he did it really, really well. So they still give it a positive rating. So it has a higher Rotten Tomatoes score. It's like 78% or something. And but a lot of the people don't seem to, a lot of the ones that I've read don't seem to call it a masterpiece as compared to his other films. And I think that's totally fair. If you enjoy watching his craft, if you enjoy watching Wes Anderson's craft, and if you enjoy, like, I had a guy behind me at the theater who was laughing the entire time. And I was like, what are you laughing at? Like,
I actually laughed quite a lot.
I laughed a lot, but he was laughing at stuff that I was like, what are you laughing at? Like,
I had a theater that was laughing the entire movie, and I laughed quite a lot, and I enjoyed a lot of moments individually.
Yeah.
But I was like very early on going like, oh no, it's just more of this. It's more of what, but yeah. So, okay, we'll get into a little bit of the plot of this film.
We don't have to go through the whole thing.
We don't have to go through the whole thing. If you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, we've already talked about a few moments. We haven't gotten into any specific plot beats, but so I will say from the jump, since I had this expectation of like, I'd been told he's trying some different things. We open on this shot that I'm like, this shot looks like so specifically Wes Anderson, this plane that we're in, and it's But what was different to me, what caught my eye immediately and made me go, oh my gosh, like immediately was Zsa Zsa Corda is sitting on this plane and he's got this assistant behind him and they hear this bumping noise and Benicio del Toro turns around and looks at the guy and then the guy just blows up and like half his body just and the way that
so weird.
Like it's just like the top half of his body is like gone and there's just a splatter of blood on the wall and the side of the plane blows out. And I thought and I laughed at that and thought that was like, and I also
what the heck?
And I was like, I've never seen that level of like gore in a Wes Anderson movie. The top half of a guy's body just blow.
And the actual the score is very like and I was like, wow, I've never heard this in a Wes Anderson movie.
I thought the exact same thing. I thought Alexander Desplat is definitely bringing a different energy to, or is it, I don't know, Desplat? I don't know if it,
Desplat. I don't know. I call him Desplat. It's
Desplat.
Desplat.
Alexander Desplat.
He does a good job.
It definitely is. I noticed that immediately. I was like, well, this is a different sound. But the framing was quite familiar. Here's another thing about these movies. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep speaking in generalities, is the earlier films were shot on location. And I think that matters. I think that like being in a real place matters. And the last three films have all been entirely shot on sound studios. And you just feel it. And it's almost like he is cool with you feeling it. Like he wants you to feel the artifice of, he wants it to feel like theater almost. Like everything's like very clearly a set. And I just miss real locations. Like Moonrise Kingdom has real locations, and I just miss real places being part of these films. But anyway, we're on this very clearly it's a set, this plane. Zsa Zsa Corda people are always trying to assassinate him in this movie. His plane crashes into a cornfield. I think this is funny, this idea that like throughout the whole movie, this runner of him being like, I recognize that assassin. And
that was pretty funny.
Either he's hired the guy before or that person has tried to kill him before.
Or they've worked for him before and they got, he did something to him. That was pretty funny. He crashes, and then they think, because he shot out the pilot beforehand, with the ejection button, because the pilot wasn't doing what he said. And then they're interviewing the pilot and they're like, oh, Zsa Zsa Corda is dead. How do you feel? And he's like, oh, well, I tried to tell him. And then he like walks up like into
This
the
was funny.
broadcast. And he's like, "What are you holding?" He's like, "I don't know. I've tried to put it back in, but it's really hard to do that."
I like what he said. He goes, they're like, "What do you got there?" And he's like, "I think it's a vestigial organ." He's like,
That's right. Yeah.
Which
That was pretty funny. Yeah.
there were, like I'm saying, there were a lot of laughs in this
Yes.
movie that I like,
Yeah.
just like hold it, and some of the deadpan delivery works for some of this stuff. Like,
It
it's
does.
funny to just have a guy holding his stomach and being like, "I think it's a vestigial organ, but I'm not, it's pretty hard to put back in."
Yeah. That was funny. That was funny.
And I also, there's a recurring motif in this film where every time Zsa Zsa gets assassinated, he dies for a little bit.
Yeah.
And he goes to sort of this really interesting version of the afterlife that's like very clearly inspired by film, impressionistic film from the early
it's like
20th
German
century.
impressionistic. It felt like,
yeah. And it's very clearly like, it just sort of feels like a world that Wes Anderson wanted to have in the film. And I think it's fine. None of those sequences ever really did anything for me.
No,
but
me either.
That's basically where Willem Dafoe lives. That's where we see Bill Murray later on in the movie as God. And they do this thing where Bill Murray's kind of like a giant. And I thought that was kind of fun. But none of the sequences really, it just was sort of like, it looked like Wes Anderson wanted to do an homage to a thing there.
Yeah, there's like a specific movie that it felt like that's like old. I'll have to try and find it, but yeah, it very much felt purposeful, and they're all a little disjointed purposefully, but they do seem to reflect what's going on in his life at that time.
Yeah.
And but that definitely took a lot of like, okay, what is going on here?
Yeah.
But it's good.
Yeah, and so we're just meeting Zsa Zsa. We're not really sure that what his whole deal is, but he survives this. He survives this plane crash.
Is it here? It's either here or after the like government boardroom scene that we have this over the head shot of Zsa Zsa in the bath. And
what'd you think about this shot?
Sequence. I thought this blew my mind.
It
was beautiful.
Yeah,
it was amazing. Like I loved the whole thing. I was like, dude, this is amazing.
Yeah,
like the way that it's shot and the way, and actually he used a different DP for this movie. This is the first time he used this DP, and this shot specifically, this whole opening scene is just him in the bath. It's all slow motion, very Wes Anderson. They're all helping, like his servants are helping him. He's smoking a cigar, and they put like champagne in the bidet, which I was like, what the crap? Like,
I didn't even see that. I didn't even see that.
Yeah, it was. Maybe I'm wrong. Please tell me if I'm wrong.
You might be right. Like, I was just so fixated on the image of taking in. It is gorgeous. And again, it's like, it's the best of what Wes Anderson can offer us as a film that is like, just sometimes the image is so striking.
Absolutely.
And this title sequence is amazing. It's like up there amongst the best that he's ever done.
Totally.
And so again, I was optimistic at the top of this movie, going like, okay, we're off to like a pretty good start here.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of people talk about this opening title sequence, and it is like perfectly square to the tiles of the bathroom. And the way that he shot this, which I think is really fun, is I'm pretty sure they shot it in either 72 or 48, probably 72 frames per second. And he had everyone move really fast. He told all of the people to be moving like, so he was like, you need to look like you're walking normally, but move like double time. So he staged it so all of the help would like be kind of walking around fast motion, so that when they went to, when they shot it in 72 or 48, whatever they did, it would have this extra like they could have the slow motion feel, but still be moving at a nice pace.
It did. Yeah. Now that you say that, I can see it did have a weird, like, it feels slow motion, but they are moving faster. That's cool that they did it that way. 'Cause it feels like a different type of slow motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very striking. And I really like them when they finally do the Phoenician Scheme, how like the colors go on the screen. And then Benicio del Toro, who's been in the bath the entire time, just looks up at the camera and looks directly into the lens. And
it's pretty great. It was a great opening scene.
Yeah. And so then we start getting to know, I think then we go to the boardroom and we hear these
Yeah.
guys talk about
Which, basically what they do is they're trying to get Zsa Zsa, and they artificially up the price of like rivets or nails or whatever, or screws or whatever it is, so that he has to find more money. He has to fill the gap. He has a gap that he has to fill for this Phoenician scheme. That's the movie. It's just him trying to find money. Which when it comes down to it, this is one of the frustrations that I had with it, is like, you're making this seem very, very complicated when all it is like he just has to find money from people.
You're right. You're right.
So
Like
that was
the
like a weird
writing,
thing.
the writing makes it seem like there's something so much more intricate
Yeah.
going on. And the movie is, he's got this scheme, this
Yeah.
sort of real, like this sort of like, there's like these 3 different or 4 different things that he's building with different partners, and he wants them to all work together to sort of build an empire for himself.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about Zsa Zsa Corda is he's a ruthless, pragmatist and businessman. He doesn't care about anything other than the bottom line. He's completely unemotional. He's trained himself not to care about family or friendship or anything. All that matters to him is money and legacy and power. But he's also he's not cruel in any way. He's not like vindictive or malicious. He's just very
he just wants to get done. He always wants his 5%. And this whole thing is, this Phoenician scheme could pay him 5% for the next 150 years. And he's worried about, he wants that for his family, but he doesn't really care about his family. He cares about the money so that his family can be fine and that he can keep the money. And I mean, that's an important thing for his character, because again, as similar way to Royal Tenenbaum, he just kind of, he cares more about that than his actual children. And I mean, later on in the movie, we find out that he adopts kids just because he's like, oh, maybe this kid could be, he could be the next Einstein. So like, you never know.
Yeah, he's always looking for like a good heir. And I like it. Like, he brings in his daughter to tell her that she's going to be his heir. And he's got 9 sons that live across the street from him and he lets them come over and like visit for dinner and stuff, but they live across the street. And then she's like, how come none of your sons are, and he just says, because they're not my heirs. Just like, they're not worthy of being my heir. But I have them to observe them.
Well, and then even she, like, so Liesel is her name, and he's like, I'm making you sole heir to my estate. And she's like, why? He's like, it's on a trial basis. And he keeps saying that, this is a trial basis, because he doesn't even know if she is worthy to be his heir, which again comes back in a nice way on paper, how it all works out in the end.
But yeah, you're like the scheme of the film is, he's got all these different deals going on, and there's all these different people who are conspiring against Zsa Zsa Corda, because he's this kind of almost like tax evading, tycoon that like, I guess there's like different world governments that are trying to stop him from building what he's trying to build. And again, this all could have been clearer. I could have used more clarity on like, why do these different groups want him dead? What is so dangerous to them about the Phoenician? What's so bad about this guy trying to build an empire for his family? Why, and I think it was said in these opening scenes, but it's just delivered so quickly. There's also a part of me that feels like this is one of those films that is probably going to go down smoother on repeat watches. I'm going to get more information. But that also bothers me, that because I don't have right now much of a desire to like sit through it again. So it's kind of like Tenet. I really like Tenet, but it's also a movie that like, you got to see it like 2 or 3 times before you go like, okay, I'm really starting to get, which is frustrating, because it's like, why is the filmmaker putting obstacles in my way?
It's funny. I heard another reviewer who said that he felt this is this movie, The Phoenician Scheme, is very, very similar to Tenet in the fact that Christopher Nolan got in his own way and he did his own things, to where he did what Wes Anderson does, which is like, you're making it harder for us to like this movie because of all the things that you love are getting in the way. And that is what happened, which is like, you're giving us so much information here in the Phoenician Scheme that I don't really care to watch it again. Like, it's hard for me to think about watching it again, because there's so much that could have been simplified or brought out in a more creative way. But anyway.
Yeah, and really the plot of the movie is like he's just got to go to his different business partners and convince them to cover the gap.
Yeah.
So that they can keep the scheme alive. That's it.
And he has to get a new assistant, which is Michael Cera,
because his first assistant got blown in half.
Yeah. Which and again, Michael Cera is like the whole time he actually has personality.
Yeah.
He's this like he's this, you know, he has a horrible accent, which I thought was hilarious. Like he's like the whole time he's talking, I thought it was funny.
His name's Bjorn.
My name is Bjorn.
Yeah.
Like he's like overly compensating, but so he is the assistant and he gives him a lie detector test to make sure that he's not a spy. And but he was a funny character. He immediately falls in love with Liesel, who is a nun who is going to take her vows, you know, and I mean that's really kind of the beginning of the movie. And then they got to go and they got to get money from all these investors, from these 4 investors. And the first people that they go and see are Tom Hanks and
Bryan Cranston. And on their way there, they get shot at by another assassin. And this is our first time where we hear Zsa Zsa go. He's looking at him with binoculars, and he goes, "I think I recognize that assassin."
Yeah.
And you know, there's so many there's deliveries that work in Wes Anderson movies with the dry stuff like that, just kind of being like, I feel very safe.
Yeah, you know, I myself feel very safe. Yeah.
I like when they're in the plane flying to see Tom Hanks and Bryan Cranston and a noise happens and he goes like this and she goes, "What's wrong?" And he goes, "That's the same noise that happened before my plane blew up last time." And she goes, "Should I be scared?" He goes, "No, this time nothing happened. So I myself will be very, very safe."
Yeah. And
it's like, it's like the same exact noise happens. He's just like,
that was funny. Yeah, he always carries around grenades in a fruit basket.
This is a really good runner, is that he's always got a box full of hand grenades. And every time he goes to meet with one of his business partners, he goes, "Help yourself to a hand grenade." And they go, "You're very kind."
Yeah, and they love it. I thought that was very funny.
But again, it's like it's just like it's too much of a good thing almost. It's like everything gets put into this. Like, so a lot of the humor in those earlier films is from actors' choices and not just the dialogue. It's like the way that like Owen Wilson will say to Margot, you know, like, "Please stop belittling me," you know, or it's like the way that they deliver the line is funny. Whereas here it's just the repetition that's funny of just going, "Help yourself to a hand grenade. You're very kind."
Oh, you're very kind.
And it's that same delivery every time, but it's like nobody gets to have their own approach to it. Everyone has to do it the same way every time, and it makes the joke work, but it also rips humanity out of the movie and out of the characters.
Well, and like those moments are funny, but everything between them is so forced and so much of a, you know, statue delivery that it really is like, okay, like those little parts are funny, but everything between it is not. It's not grabbing me, and I'm not invested in the main parts of the story. Because I mean, he goes and he visits. Riz Ahmed is he's like this king of. Is he the king of Phoenicia, or he's the prince of Phoenicia, I think, or something? And he wants to get all this done, but then he's got to go to Tom Hanks and Bryan Cranston. Who Bryan Cranston had some character. I thought because he's just mad all the time,
fiddling with it.
Yeah, it was very funny.
Yeah.
And like there are these 2 American businessmen, and you know, Tom Hanks has got a Coke and Bryan Cranston's got a Hershey bar, and like I thought that was pretty funny, but
also like this scene, so they're the first people that they go to, and they're mad because Zsa Zsa's been fiddling with their contract, but he's trying to explain to them, "I need you guys to cover the gap," and they're like, "That's not the deal." You know, but he says, "If I can beat you at basketball, will you cover the gap?" Which I personally, I don't get this sequence because I just don't know why Zsa Zsa would. He knows that they're excellent basketball players and that he's not. And he, for some reason, says, "How about we play basketball?" And like knowing that he's going to lose. And I don't get, other than like, it just feels like Wes Anderson was like, wouldn't it be funny to watch Bryan Cranston and Tom Hanks sort of do like an old-fashioned, old-timey like hook
Yeah.
shot basketball like sequence where we kind of play them in fast motion. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of funny, but what's the point in the movie of Zsa Zsa having a terrible negotiating tactic?
Yeah.
And
I think it also, like, I have heard that this is like a heist movie, right?
Yeah.
Like, kind of. It's kind of, but it's Wes Anderson's version of a heist movie, which Wes Anderson seems to be the deconstructed filmmaker, right? He takes everything apart. So this felt like a, you know, like something you would see in a heist movie, like, oh, we've got to get it done, but I'm going to do this impossible thing that I'm not really good at, but that's my only chance. And so that's kind of, but he just did it in his own way, which, I mean, you never see what actually happens because they're up like 4-0 and it's first to 5. And I mean, it wasn't really even basketball either. It was more like
horse,
pig, you know, horse, like,
yeah.
And so like he tells the prince who's never played basketball, he's like, if he makes this shot from, you know, the back of wherever, you know, you'll tell me, give me 15% of what you need or whatever. And like, we don't see the shot, but we assume that he made it because they're on board. They're paying like this 15%. So it was kind of a weird, it ultimately was weird. It wasn't really that funny. Like Tom Hanks and Bryan Cranston, they were pretty funny, but it ultimately just didn't really land for me.
Yeah, it just kind of felt like what would be a quirky, weird thing for us to do here? And it's just like, okay, yeah, it just, again, the plot's not that complex. He's just got to go to his partners and ask them if they'll cover their portion of the gap and convince, and every time he has to do something else to convince them. So they get back in the plane, and where do they go next? Where are they off?
They go to Marseille, Bob.
And that's
Jeffrey
the French
Wright guy.
No, Marseille Bob, who has the club.
Yeah, he's got a club. And I mean, honestly, this really,
I barely remember this sequence at all.
I also wondered, like, so he's supposed to, you know, it's every time he asks somebody for more money, the sequence plays out exactly the same. They yell at each other and no one can hear anything. And then like they stop. And in this scene, he takes a bullet for Marseille Bob, for these weird, like, communist people who are going around like wanting to, you know, what were they? They were rebels or something.
Yeah, like revolutionaries that are trying.
Yeah, and like,
and again, that wasn't very clear, like what they are,
well,
or
And I was wondering if Zsa Zsa set that up, but he didn't. Ultimately, like, he steps in front of a bullet for the guy, and then they like, it went through his money or whatever, so it didn't really go that deep, and the guy picks it up anyway. Because he took a bullet, the French guy says, "Okay, I'm indebted to you. I'll give you the money." And then
pretty
they go
fun practical effect where they reach into the bullet.
Oh, that was great. That was great.
I was like, that was pretty good practical effect there.
I was like, wow, how did you guys do that? Looks really good.
And then, you know, but you're right. These scenes play out identically because it's like he gets to Marseille Bob and he's like, help yourself to a hand grenade. You're too kind. You know, they yell at each other. Marseille Bob agrees to a smaller percentage than 25, but some of it. Then they go to Jeffrey Wright while he's bleeding out from this bullet wound.
Yeah.
I think we even have maybe another him going to heaven sequence here.
I think we do.
He passes out. Jeffrey Wright's the guy who maybe has a little more character because he opens the door and goes, "Hey, how you doing? How you doing? I get, you know, like,
hey, man, how are you? How are you?" Yeah. I thought that was pretty funny. Yeah.
Yeah. But once again, Jeffrey Wright is a guy who he's like an admiral of a ship, and
he's the richest of them all, I guess.
Yeah, and he
so
doesn't
expecting him. Yeah,
and he says, you know, thank you for the hand grenade as well, and he doesn't want to cover his portion of the gap, but he does do a blood transfusion with Zsa Zsa to bring him back to life.
Yeah,
and I just like, you know, like, it's just sort of a plot where it's like, okay, all right. And I think what could really help this movie is just letting this cast of world-class actors be real people, you know, it just feels like a cartoon or like, I don't know, like it just doesn't, but
it's
it
weird.
When do they crash in the jungle? Is that next?
I think it is. Yeah, I think it is. Cause like somebody else is trying to assassinate them. They have to fly to go to his cousin or whatever. They're going, and then they crash in the jungle, and
because they get shot by like another plane. And I think he sees the pilot and says, "I recognize that assassin." Which is, you know, it's this.
Yeah, and they crash and they all survive. And this was kind of funny because this is when we find out that Michael Cera is actually covert American agent, and he's not Bjorn, but like so he doesn't speak with his accent anymore, but he still loves Liesel, and they do have a fight scene which was pretty funny because they like you don't see anything other than like a body fly at the top of the screen, and like so that was kind of funny, but ultimately
he kind of likes to do these like old school effects of like speeding things up when people are fighting, and it almost looks like a fight from like a you know, like a Charlie Chaplin movie or like a Three Stooges movie. And he's been doing that more and more since like Grand Budapest. You know, but and it's funny, but also like I just watched Life Aquatic, and it's like the scene when the pirates take over the ship, and then he has to fight the pirates, and you know, and Steve like shoots his, I'm like, I just like the way that feels more, the handheld camera following Bill Murray around, and it just feels like more real and messy. I don't know.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, but ultimately Zsa Zsa falls in like quicksand, and Michael Cera pulls him out, and he's like, I'll be a double agent. And they
could you believe how similar this quicksand rescue was to
Princess Bride?
It was like identical.
Yeah, it was.
Like he like ties a vine around his waist and does the like Carrie Elway's dive into the quicksand. I was so shocked. I was like, oh my, was that a Princess Bride reference?
That's what I wondered too. It's got to be, right? Because I felt the exact same way. Like this looks exactly the same.
Yeah,
But basically, like, this is when Zsa Zsa seems to start having his change. Like, this is like when he's realizing that, like, because he's connecting with Liesel, and he is like, they do have a relationship. He realizes, you know, that he's probably a little too heartless in all of his business things, and she seems to be a good person, even though she has like, you know, she starts drinking a lot and she doesn't know. But anyway, she's kind of bringing him around, and he realizes maybe he should be a little bit better. But then they go, I think at this point they go and see Scarlett Johansson.
That's right.
And he,
which
like,
again, I think Scarlett Johansson is very forgettable in this movie. And it's just like it's just sort of like, I don't even know why she's here. You know, I just am like, what are we, like, why?
Yeah. And it's like his second cousin, and he's like, well, if you marry me, will you give me the money? And like, I didn't get that. I didn't get that at all. Why they wanted to get married and why she would give him money for that. But whatever, I guess he gets something out of it. And then
one thing we didn't mention is when he's first trying to make Liesel his heir, she's mad at him because she was told that he murdered her mom. And he tells her, I did not murder your mom or have your mother killed. And he's like, very, you know, and he seems sincere about it.
I don't think he did.
Yeah. But the last person we have to go see is
and he says to Liesel, my half brother killed your mother because he was having an affair with her, but she was also having an affair with this other guy who could also be your father. And like, anyway, so he promises her, like, you'll get to confront my half brother, who is Benedict Cumberbatch, who they go and see finally, right? I think that's
they finally everybody that's part of the Phoenician scheme all meets up at, like, I guess the headquarters of Benedict Cumberbatch, and they're doing he's doing a big presentation to all of the investors in this project. And I kind of like this like little set, the model that comes out that shows how the whole thing is supposed to operate. I thought that was fun. But again, it's like, I just wish the movie wouldn't make it so hard for me to understand how all of this is supposed to work together. I just wish that he could deliver the exposition in a way that's just clearer, so that I'm not sitting there the whole movie going like, I still don't even know what it is we're doing, you know, like but at this place, when he's trying to convince his half brother to, they're still 50% off of their goal from covering the gap, and so he needs to now try to convince his half brother to cover the last 50%. And not only does his half brother say, I'm not going to do that for you, but it's also revealed eventually that his half brother's the one who's been sending all of the assassins. And they have this fight scene that was kind of fun, where they're like rolling down the stairs, and it's our one moment where the camera kind of gets a little handheld and breaks away from the perfect framing. And you know,
well, and before that, right before that, Zsa Zsa says, I am going to give up my half. I'm going to fill the gap with this 50%, and I'm not going to make any money from this deal, but I want to make sure that it gets done. And that's kind of like his final like change. Like that's the journey that he has gone on, which is like, I'm just going to get this done because I think it should be done, because I want to help this country of Phoenicia or whatever. And like, I want to prove to my daughter that I can do this. So he covers it. And then like they have the whole fight scene, and then like he beats him, but then like Benedict Cumberbatch comes back up in and gets on the model and pulls out a hand grenade, and they're all like, oh no, like the hand grenade. And he decides, I don't know what happens. I don't know why he does this, because he just kind of like, Benedict Cumberbatch is like foaming at the mouth because he's threw like a poison at him.
Yeah.
Zsa Zsa did. And he, instead of throwing the grenade at everybody, he just kind of holds it close, and then he explodes. And you see his little feet at the top, which I thought was also again a funny little thing. But like, I don't know, like, because they say like, oh, he says, Benedict Cumberbatch says that he is Liesel's real father. He's like, she has my eyes, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I really don't know who the real father is. It's not Benicio del Toro, I don't think. It's either Benedict Cumberbatch or her mom's other lover.
Yeah.
Which I thought it was the other lover. I mean, I don't know. It doesn't really matter, but did you have any?
Yeah, again, like, I just don't think that these characters feel human enough for me to even have cared about that.
Yeah.
I just was sort of like watching and like laughing at these little moments, like, you know, just the repetition of, I think I recognize that assassin, or help yourself to a hand grenade, or, you know, the little idiosyncrasies of the different characters. But there was nothing, I wasn't like invested in the relationship between Liesel and Zsa Zsa.
Yes.
I wasn't invested in the relationship between Liesel and Bjorn, even though I liked Michael Cera in this movie. I didn't care who Liesel's dad was. I don't know why. I don't know if I'm supposed to care about Zsa Zsa marrying Scarlett Johansson. Whereas again, like going back to the Royal Tenenbaums, I was like, I care about the relationship between Henry Sherman and Etheline. And I care about the relationship between Richie and Margot and her father. And I care about even like Eli's relationship to Richie and the family. And I just, and I care about Chaz's relationship with his father. And I care about like that whole story, you know. In Life Aquatic, I care about the relationship between Ned and Steve. I care about the brothers in the Darjeeling Limited. I just was like, like all of these things that are here in this screenplay of this father-daughter relationship and who's the real father. And I just was like, I don't know how any of these people know each other. I don't know who these people are. Any of the business, like the partners, like, who are these people to each other?
Yeah.
Do they have history? What, like, you know, I don't know. I just was like, it never got through. And again, this is something that maybe could be fixed on repeat viewings. Maybe I'll possibly care more, or I'll understand more. But like, the last one that really worked for me was Grand Budapest. And again, we have actors in that movie who are jumping off the screen. We've got Ralph Fiennes, who's like really taking control of that character. And
no, totally. I totally agree. And I mean, the movie ends, you know, Zsa Zsa has lost all of his money. And he's a cook in a restaurant. But the Phoenician scheme actually went through. But he is poor, but he is actually a good cook. They say he's a really good cook. And he ends, you know, he's working at this restaurant with his daughter. Even though it's not his biological daughter, he does take her on as her daughter, which is the important thing.
Yeah.
But again, like, if I were to care about these characters more, I feel like that would have landed more, because on paper, when you break it down, it's like, yeah, that's a great story of like a ruthless businessman who, through the course of the movie, finds out that his daughter is not his daughter, but he still loves her anyway. Like, it works on paper.
And that he chooses family over.
He chooses to be poor. Like, he gives up all of his money. And there's a running joke about slave labor, like how it's bad. He doesn't think it's bad, and Liesel thinks it's bad. And then that's when he talks to God, who is Bill Murray, and he's like, of course it's bad. Like, why would you, like, it's damnable, right? I think he says, or whatever. Which is really funny. But like, it just doesn't, like, if I were to connect with these characters, I feel like it would have hit really, really hard. but I really don't care that much.
Like, you know, like I get emotional at the end of Life Aquatic when they're looking, and it's this really silly scene. Like they're looking at the jaguar shark,
right?
And
it's
this
beautiful.
jaguar shark has eaten his best friend in front of him, and also his son, who we don't know if it's his actual son. And that's a big question of Life Aquatic. It's similar where it's like, like Ned shows up and it's implied that Ned is Steve Zissou's son, but later in the film, Angelica Houston says to Cate Blanchett, who, you know, Cate Blanchett's another great, like lively character in that movie, but she says to her, she's like, Zissou shoots blanks, so I don't know how this could be his kid, you know. But it's not really important whether or not Ned is his biological son. They have a connection, and then Ned dies in a helicopter accident. And you see like the weight of everything that Steve's been through. And he's looking at the jaguar shark and he says, do you think he remembers me? And everyone in the submarine puts their hands on him, and Bill Murray starts crying, and it's like really emotional. And then Cate Blanchett takes his hand and puts it on her stomach because she's pregnant, and she goes, in 11 years he'll be 11 and a half. And Bill Murray says, that's my favorite age, you know. And it's like this really like tender moment. And also you've got in the Royal Tenenbaums, you've got Royal giving the Dalmatian dog to Chaz.
And Chaz being with him when he dies. Just a quick scene, but that packs such an emotional punch.
And it's like, because the whole movie you've been like you feel Chaz's resentment for his father, and you feel what it means to have him soften up and say, we've had a really rough year, Dad. And he goes, I know you have, you know, like, and like you but it's like if they had been monotone the whole movie, and if Chaz was just like, I don't like you because you shot me with a BB gun. And he's like, well, I shot you with a BB gun because you know. And then at the end of the movie, he was like, I'm gifting you a dog. And he was like, thank you for the dog. It's been a hard year. And he like, it would not, you know, like it just would be like, on paper, yes, you've got a nice little story here. But since everything was delivered with no fluctuation or color, I just don't, by the end of it, I'm like, cool, that's nice. I'm glad that Zsa and Liesel opened a restaurant together and that they seem to like each other. But
and they have a moment where they're just playing cards at the end. That's kind of like that's supposed to be the emotional connection scene, and it's like, it's fine, you know, like, oh, he's poor now, but you can tell that he is happy. Like, that's the point. But there's no emotional weight. Like, it just, oh, okay, like, cool. All right. And that's the end of the movie. And Michael Cera proposes to Liesel, and she says yes. So
that's
all.
So, you know, there's a lot here from a technical standpoint that's like really pretty cool, interesting. There's actors that have fun moments. There's things that are funny, but it just, like you said at the beginning, it's just like, where's the life? Where's the heart? Where's the humanity? And I think there's so many, you know, I just want to see him shoot on a real location again. You know, I just those things matter, I think, you know. And he doesn't seem interested in that. So I think at this point, it's like, it's probably my fault as a person that's like, I got to stop having that expectation of him. He doesn't seem interested in, this is the kind of movie he wants to make now. And I don't know. Scores.
Let's get into scores.
We on this podcast, we give scores out of 10, 10 being the best. We give scores for technical rating. We give scores for the ending of a film. We give scores for rewatchability. We give scores for the cultural impact of a film, cultural significance, and we give a score for our subjective feeling about the film. So, Cramer, Phoenician Scheme, technical rating.
My technical rating, I gave a 6.5 because everything is composed so well. Like, the cinematography is amazing, just how it's shot, and like the composition is really, really good. I might be being a little too generous because everything else is not that great. Like the acting, the acting is not bad. It's just a specific way that I don't think is very good because I could not connect with them emotionally. But they're giving Wes Anderson exactly what he wants. So I don't know. I feel like I can't have it too low, but I don't want it too high. So
my highest rating is the technical rating for this one.
Well.
I've got it at an 8 because
Yep.
when I take away my subjective feeling about it,
Yeah.
I have to look at it and go, he's executing technically exactly what him and his team wanted to execute.
Yeah.
And I can't really fault them for that. It's
No.
not, it's just not working for me. It's not connecting with me on an emotional level, but the actors are executing what they believe a Wes Anderson movie is supposed to be. He seems to agree that like that's what he wants out of them. It bothers me that he's got Tom Hanks and Bryan Cranston and Scarlett Johansson and Jeffrey Wright and like and Benedict Cumberbatch and Benicio del Toro, and he's just sort of content to be and he's willing to just let them all be the same. And just like I gave the movie an 8 and I dock it the 2 points because even though those aspects are executed the way that they want to execute them, to me it's a technical mistake. I think it's a mistake to refuse to leave the studio lot for all of these films, to be like, you can shoot some of this on a lot, but for some of these scenes, like get out there, get out into a desert. Like when you're out in the desert get out there. I want to be in the jungle, show me a real life thing, and it will just break up the monotony of, and I but it's hard to like say my subjective feeling should trump what the filmmaker wants to accomplish.
Right.
And so for it's like it's hard to say that these movies are not technically well constructed. So
yeah. I think though, looking at a director's technical, well, you said it. I agree.
I think, but I give it an 8. How about for the ending?
The ending I gave a 5. I mean, the ending again on paper is like, oh yeah, that's a great a guy who is ruthless and rich turns out to be, but he's not happy. Turns, through the course of the movie comes out and, is poor, but has created a relationship with his daughter. So now he's happy. So I gave it a 5, but it's just the actual execution of it is not that great. And it also, because it's so void of emotion, it does not land for me. So on paper, it's good, but in execution, it's not. So a 5, right? Kind of down the middle.
Yeah. I gave it a 6. I was pretty tired of what this movie was presenting by the end of the film. And I was pretty ready for it to just like wrap up. And the ending, like you said, on paper works, but it doesn't quite get me. I think I'm just such a like Wes simp that it's hard for me to give him anything lower than a 6, where I'm like, like the story wraps up in a nice way. The movie is consistent from beginning to end. But I didn't get to the end and go like, oh wow, that it's just kind of like, okay, sure, all right, fine, and that's how I felt about that. How about the rewatchability of this film?
Rewatchability, I gave a 4. I don't really want to rewatch it again. Now, having said that, after talking about it, it's like, okay, maybe I could watch it again. He's an extremely talented filmmaker that there's a lot of things that you could like. So maybe I should, maybe I should give it a 5. I'll give it a 5 because if I rewatched it, maybe I'd like it more, but I just don't really want to rewatch it.
So. That's the problem. Yeah, I gave it a 6, and it's like I wanted to watch it again before doing this episode because I saw it like 2 weeks ago, and I was like, I should probably. But every time I kept opening my AMC app to see what movie I want to go see, and that was one of the options, I was like, I really don't want to go spend more time in the. But I know that the case with a lot of his recent films has been that I do appreciate what's going on more on the second watch, oftentimes the third watch. And I know that's also been the case kind of throughout his career for me, that like, the first Royal Tenenbaums is one of my favorite, if not my favorite film of all time. And I didn't quite get it the first time. So I feel like this movie could probably work better for me on a rewatch. And still it's hard for me to like want to go to the theater and give it another shot. I might have to wait till it comes out to stream at home to rewatch it again. But it's hard for me to rewatch any of the recent ones. Like so I don't know, but I gave it a 6. Cultural impact.
Cultural impact, I gave a 5. And maybe it'll be. I feel like when looking at Wes Anderson films, this is not going to be the top ones that you talk about, but it's definitely not going to be in the bottom. So but we'll see. I mean, a lot of people do feel like this is his return to form. But I also just don't. I don't think it's going to be the best or the worst. It'll just sit right there in the middle. So that's why I gave it a 5.
Yeah, I gave it a 6 again because I feel like the response that it's getting is pretty positive overall. I've seen a lot of online people who have been frustrated with the last couple installments feel like this one, you know, brought it back for them, and I didn't see what they were seeing. I felt like it was just more of the same that we've been getting from the last couple installments.
Right.
If not even like more so. Like if not, it just feels like each film gets like tighter and tighter, like, and more constricted and more constricted. But the culture seems to like, what I've seen people saying is that the last 3 films feel like a trilogy for him, that French Dispatch and Asteroid City and this one feel like a very specific style that he is committed to, that he's, and maybe there's something there that like later on, as we look back at this, it will be seen through a different lens of like, he was in a different mode in his career and he was doing something different, and we just weren't really appreciating it at the time. So I could see this opening up to more favorable reception from me and others with time. That's why I have it at a 6, but I still am like, I just don't know. Subjective score.
My subjective score is a 5.
Yeah.
I mean, like he's doing exactly what he wants to do, but it just did not land for me. But I can appreciate the good things about it, which as we talked about, there are some really great things, some really funny things, some really great cinematography, but ultimately the story itself is just pretty bland for me.
Yep, mine is at a 6. Unfortunately, I wish I could give it higher. I really do.
Yeah.
I'm such a Wes Anderson fan.
Yeah.
I have 2 Wes Anderson tattoos. 2. And I am such a fan that I want to just instinctively be like 7, because it's just because sometimes when I sit through these, like when I was watching Phoenician Scheme, I was like, look, if I still compare this to like most people who are making movies, it's still got just like so much. It's still nice to see a director who's so clear about their vision and and who makes movies in such a unique style. But it's kind of like what you said, where you were like, there's not a lot of people who have such an immediately recognizable thing, and that's not necessarily a compliment, because sometimes these later films feel like they're more about him and what he wants to do visually than they are about just telling a good story. And so I'm like, you're definitely doing what you want to do, but I think sometimes it's getting in the way of your stories being accessible or relatable. And so I wish I could give this one a higher score, but I just felt overall like I was once again kind of disappointed and once again pining for something that feels more like those earlier films. So there it is. Have you seen The Phoenician Scheme? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you feel like this is a return to form? Let us know in the comments. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all of those good things. And if you want to keep up with us, if you want to watch along with us, we will be watching 28 Years Later next. That's the next big one. I mean, there's a lot of good things in the theater right now. I just saw Life of Chuck. That's a good one. Maybe I'll do a mini episode on that. Maybe we'll do an episode on that later on. There's Materialist by Celine Song, which I'm excited about. I really like her. I loved Past Lives. I'm excited for that. But we're going to be watching 28 Years Later. Danny Boyle, Alex Garland, they're back in business in that franchise. And I think this is kicking off a whole new trilogy of 28 something later films. And so we'll be back with that next week. If you want to get to the theater and watch it so that you know what we're talking about. And we'll see you then.
Bye-bye.